And we are live. It's Dr. J in the house with Evan Brand. Today, we're going to be talking about, is your smartphone hurting your brain? We're going to be talking about melatonin, gut health, Alzheimer's, and everything connected to technology and that. Evan, how are we doing today, man?
Hey man, I'm doing great. And you know what's interesting is that this was a Canadian study. So this came out just a couple of weeks ago, Canadian Journal of Cardiology. And this is a 500,000 participants. And now this is an association. Okay, we'll make that clear. This isn't causation. But what we're finding is that the people who did the most calls, so who use their phones the most. Now, that's interesting in the modern world, because like people are scrolling all day, they're doing YouTube, they're doing Instagram. So when they say who use their phones the most, like that's a little hard to quantify. But anyway, they're saying here a 21% increased risk of experiencing a cardiovascular event compared to the people that made or received calls for 5 minutes or less. Those people had like no increased risk. But then when you go up to the six or more, so that's six or more calls, and that's in terms of hours. Okay, so six or more hours, 21% increased risk of a cardiovascular event. And then they're saying here that psychological distress explains 11.5% of the association. Sleep quality is another 5%. Neuroticism, another 2%. And then they just barely mention, though, if you do Control F, you'll barely see a mention here about RF EMF exposure. And the authors are suggesting the link maybe because of the RF EMF exposure from the mobile phone in combination. And then if you smoke or you have diabetes, that it's going to increase your risk more. Duh. So it's interesting. It's hard for people to just flat out say, hey, it's the RF, but I think it's a factor. I mean, there's a whole thing that Dr. Martin Paul's done about the whole voltage gated calcium channels. You could just Google Martin Paul EMF. You guys can dive into hours of content there. You could look at Devra Davis. She's done incredible work in the EMF category and how it may affect your mitochondria and just the overall cells of your body. But here they're just giving it just a little brief mention.
And what were the numbers again on the different increases?
Yeah. So if you are doing 6 hours of phone calls or more per week, 21% increased risk of a cardiovascular event. But
Wow.
if you're only making or receiving phone calls for 5 minutes or less, then your risk was like 3%.
Wow, that's just crazy. I got the study up here now. Would that be in the graph or was that in the conclusion area?
That was in just that medical news. Look at the last link I sent you in the
Oh
chat.
yeah. Yeah.
It's right in there. They kind of pulled it all out for you.
They summarized it for you, probably in the data section.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see it right here. That makes sense. Well, we're screwed because we're on the phone like 8 hours a day with patients. But I think a lot of this, you got to flush out a couple different things. You got to flush out, is your head up against it, radiation wise? Correlation over causation, right? It's kind of like with cholesterol. When you look at high cholesterol, yeah, you start to see maybe as cholesterol goes up, you start to see some cardiovascular issues. But then once you stratify and you take out insulin resistance and you take out oxidized cholesterol, there isn't really a big correlation for cholesterol once you pull those people out, right? Because there's other things that are driving the cholesterol issue, not just the cholesterol by itself. So correlation over causation. So it's always good to see that. But we know, especially with cell phones, a big thing for us is just going to be I'm going to get you back on here. The big thing for us is going to be the fact that it's going to have radiation. So if it's up against your phone, your head, at least keep it in speakerphone, at least use some kind of a headset. Number two, the blue light, especially at night, is going to be a big thing that impacts your circadian rhythm. It's going to impact those ganglionic cells in the eye and the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which controls essentially the circadian rhythm in your brain. So if we're getting excess of blue light late, that's going to be a big impact. And then if we're getting that blue light, that's going to shut down melatonin. And melatonin plays a powerful role in being anti-cancer, oxidative stress, antioxidants, a lot of these really important things for healing and recovery.
Yeah, all my calls are done with no EMF. I have an Ethernet cable running to this computer. There's no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on the computer. I have a hardwired mouse, a hardwired keyboard, a hardwired microphone that goes to a corded air tube headset. I mean, I've measured this. It's literally zero EMF. So if I'm doing my calls here, it's nothing. And then if I'm grabbing some calls in between, that could be on the phone. Yeah, I'll just have it. I'll be outside usually and got speaker. It's a couple feet away. When I had really bad mold and Lyme at the same time, probably 7, 8 years ago now, but when it was at my worst, I remember my hand hurting, like almost having arthritic like pains if I would watch a YouTube video or something on my phone.
Right.
I remember my hand almost getting a little bit achy. And some could say, oh, is that the position of you holding your hand like that? But no, because I would put it on airplane mode and then the feeling would go away. And I've heard this report from other people, especially clients that are sensitive to Wi Fi, Bluetooth headsets. All of them have either mold or Lyme. Like there's this underlying thing that's making them more sensitive to the EMF where other people feel nothing. Same with AirPods. I did a video, Instagram flagged it as misinformation, but it's proof because I have the Safe and Sound RF meter right there in front of your face. And I compared the Apple Watch and the AirPods to a microwave, and they're roughly the same. They're both approximately 3 million microwatts per square meter. So you kicked on the microwave, then I measured the AirPods, and you could see it for yourself on the meter, Instagram. It had almost a million views. It had 980 something thousand views, and then it got labeled as misinformation. So,
Oh wow, that's crazy. I mean,
yeah.
typically with RF headsets like Bluetooth ones, again, the biggest issue with AirPods is that it's in your ear, and then that external auditory meatus is like a straight line to your brain. So there's not a lot of tissue there. I mean, typically Bluetooth have very low absorption. That's why I use mine. If I use it, it's down low and it's down here, so it's got a lot more, area to go. So the AirPods, I think, are concerning just because they're right there in the ear. But typically with Bluetooth, they only go about 10 meters or so. The absorption rate on the radiation tends to be pretty low. The specific absorption rate is on the lower side of all the devices. But yeah, for sure, with your cell phone, especially with 5G and the amount of radiation there, you definitely want that away from your head, and at least in speaker mode, or at least some kind of a better headset. Definitely not the AirPods directly in the ears is going to be a better way to do it out of the gates.
Now, we're going to move on to this Alzheimer's and night light pollution here in a minute, but I want to just call out one thing because someone listening to this is going to go, oh, all they're talking about is phone calls. It's fine. I never talk on the phone. All I do is text. Well, when you do a text, yeah, that is going to be less because it is going to be a
There's still
ping.
light. There's
So,
still light too, though.
yeah, there is going to be
You're still
light.
getting the blue light.
But in terms of the actual RF, you are going to have a spike when the message sends, and then when the message is received, you will have a spike, but it's not going to be the continuous stream of RF like a phone call. Now, the highest that I've measured the RF coming from these devices is going to be streaming videos, streaming movies, TikTok videos, Instagram videos, YouTube videos, where you're constantly loading new media, especially video content. That's going to give you the highest levels. If you're just reading like a Reddit article, that's going to just draw a little bit of RF and then it's going to be done because it's got the text so quick. But when it's needing that high of bandwidth to capture potentially gigabytes worth of data through these videos, that's where you're getting the higher levels. And if you're really sensitive, I'm just talking to a couple people at this point, but if you're really sensitive, you can buy what are called just Ethernet adapters on Amazon. So I'm guessing the new iPhone will be announced today. So that's probably going to be USB-C, but the current iPhone is either a Lightning or whatever type of adapter, and then you can have that go to an Ethernet cable. So you could literally have an Ethernet cable to your iPhone, and it's completely airplane mode, and that'll be a way you can still do your apps if you were someone that was like bedridden with EMF sensitivity, which I've seen a few cases of.
Yep, 100%. That
Okay,
makes a lot of sense.
you want to hit that
Oh,
other
and
paper
just to
here?
give you an idea too, you got a Bluetooth headset that's about 2.5 milliwatts, and then your cell phone with 5G is 2 watts, which is that means essentially 2,000 milliwatts. So you go from 2.5 to 2,000, so almost 1,000 times more wattage, more energy going from just a general cell phone to a Bluetooth headset. So you can see there's quite a the specific absorption rates are about 1,000x higher. So just keep that in the back of your heads when you're comparing things.
Okay, and last thing, because there's going to be like two electrical engineers or some geeks that are going to message us, dude. It's non-ionizing radiation. It's a non-issue, man. It's not X-rays. It's not gamma rays. You're correct. It's not. It's not. It is not ionizing radiation. But I have seen people clinically that are sensitive to it. This is a real thing. You can pick it up on these devices. It still can warm your tissues. That's what the SAR, the specific absorption rate, the old school style of measuring the EMF of these phones. It was based on how it's heating up the tissues, and it has biological effects. So once again, look at Deborah Davis, look at Martin Paul. Mercola's interviewed them, I believe. He's got a ton of great content on that subject. I'm just the messenger boy, but those guys are doing an incredible job of studying this stuff and showing how it's affecting the cells. And I think less is better. You didn't have this 100 years ago, so it's probably like everything else in the modern world, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and once you're at a level where you're immunocompromised, you have gut infections, you have immune stressors, whether it's microbes, molds. There's some data, right? Whether it's anecdotal or not, that these frequencies can increase some of the infections and make them stronger, and allow them to create more mycotoxins or internal endotoxins. And so when you have a lot of gut stress, it's one more stressor in that stress bucket. And so I always tell patients, we just look at all the big stressors that we can have control over in that bucket, and we try to pull them out. And if that's mitigating time on the cell phone, or let's just try to get some glasses at night that are blue light blocker, or let's try to use night shift mode on your phone, right? Let's just try to do some simple things. If we're not willing to change the behavior 100%, we can at least try to keep the phone a little bit more away, get some better glasses, use some of the tech on the phone to decrease that exposure. And that's a good first step out of the gate.
Yep. All right, let's move on. Let's hit this
Yep.
Alzheimer's paper here. It's titled Alzheimer's Risk in Younger People Linked to Nightly Light Pollution in a new paper. And so what they did, this was published in Frontiers in Neuroscience. What they found here, there's a positive association between Alzheimer's prevalence and exposure to light at night, particularly in people under age 65. And so what they did is they used satellite data to study the US and figure out where has the most light pollution. And then they correlated and looked at the concentration of Alzheimer's in the brighter areas. These are the big cities: Atlanta, Louisville, St. Louis, Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, San Diego, all these hubs, New York City, Chicago, these places, Seattle, Portland, all those big cities you could name, Miami. Any of these bright places, there's higher Alzheimer's there. Now, you can't say, oh, it's just the light pollution, but we know that melatonin is a massive, massive antioxidant right up there with glutathione. And you're not going to have optimal levels of melatonin if you're having light pollution. So, obviously, we hope that you're already blacking out your room, but this is an incredible tool because this goes right into the other paper we looked at in a psychiatry journal, and it just came out in August. It's titled Melatonin, a Potential Nighttime Guardian Against Alzheimer's. So this is really, really cool stuff. And this paper talks about the gut as well, which we're going to spend a little bit of time on the gut. But what you need to know is that as you age and as you develop more inflammation and more inflammatory cytokines, your melatonin production is dropping.
100%. And we talked about gut production. Gut production for melatonin slash serotonin is 400 times higher than the actual pineal gland. I think the pineal gland makes about a third of a milligram, so about 300 or so micrograms a day. And the gut is going to convert and make melatonin via L-tryptophan, and it's going to convert that to serotonin, and then it converts serotonin to melatonin. And so gut function plays an important role because, first off, we have to have the hydrochloric acid and the enzymes to break down the protein. So we take in the protein, the tryptophan, and that gets converted to 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptophan, and then we have certain important cofactors that convert that to serotonin and then melatonin. Now, again, if we're inflamed, if our gut's not working well, we can upregulate this pathway known as the kynurenine pathway, and that can take a lot of melatonin and it can bring it down an inflammatory metabolite pathway. And so it's really important that we have good, healthy gut bacteria levels. If we're inflamed, that can cause that kynurenine quinolinic acid pathway, which is important because on an organic acid test, we can actually look at quinolinic acid. And one of the big things we recommend is more B6 to help that pathway get down regulated, and also more magnesium to decrease the inflammation. So really important that we have good inflammation levels. And again, we need the hydrochloric acid, we need the enzymes to get the building blocks to have our gut make that serotonin and then melatonin.
All right, pull that study up for me. I want to show people this, and then I'm just going
Which
to
one is it?
repeat some of what you said. I'm sharing the tab. Does it show up here? It shows the brain, the eye, the gut. Do you see that? That screen share I've got?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to say back what you said in just a little different way to make sure it goes through people's heads, because this is some geeky stuff here that gets a little tricky. So what's happening is, yes, melatonin does originate from serotonin through this tryptophan serotonin, what they're calling a biosynthesis process in the pineal gland. But now what they're saying here, this is crazy stuff. We're always going back to the gut. Right here, when intestinal barrier becomes permeable, aka leaky gut, due to inflammation or dysbiosis, pathogens, aka H. pylori, parasites, all the stuff we talk about every day, that activates the immune system. It promotes these pro-inflammatory cytokines. Those cytokines stimulate this indoleamine dioxygenase, which diverts tryptophan away from making melatonin. So instead, it makes these inflammatory things like quinolinic acid and therefore decreases melatonin. So your gut bugs, your gut infections, the bad food you had that's, maybe you're trying to get off of those processed foods and the processed dairy and the processed gluten, the damage you're doing to the gut is directly impairing proper melatonin production, therefore increasing your risk of Alzheimer's. And we see this a lot. We see people that are younger than you would imagine, 50, 60 years old, and they have massive cognitive decline already because what are we now? 5 decades into processed food. So this is a relatively new problem. I doubt we're seeing hunter gatherers with such diverse, healthy microbiomes. I doubt we're seeing hunter gatherers in the bush with Alzheimer's. Have you ever looked at that? Maybe we should pull that up.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these conditions are Neolithic, right? It's things that we have not really seen in the last 100 years in general.
I put in hunter
Well,
gatherer Alzheimer's just to see. I'm just
yeah.
curious if this is popped up. So here's a paper on it right here because this has got me interesting. I love this like evolutionary aspect here to functional medicine. So clues to Alzheimer's in the Bolivian Amazon, an isolated population here. They were studied for preventing heart disease. Now they're looking if they can
Hmm.
do the same for Alzheimer's. $7 million grant studying brain atrophy among hunter gatherers who have world's lowest reported levels of vascular aging. I wonder if they got to the study yet or not. Okay,
So
it's
while
just
you're
talking
pulling
about a
that, you got
grant.
it. Hmm.
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
showing that they did a grant for these people, these hunter gatherers in the Amazon. This is through UC Santa Barbara, but I don't see if they've actually performed the study. But they're trying to see, like, hey, do hunter gatherers not have Alzheimer's like modernized people? And I'm assuming the answer is no.
Well, if you go look at just Weston A. Price, right? Weston A. Price was a Harvard trained dentist that went around the world studying different societies untouched from man, right? These were hunter-gatherer societies, whether it's the Maasai or different Australian type of tribes that were untouched. He went in kind of with the vegetarian vegan bent, and he found that most hunter-gatherer societies, if there was meat, they ate meat. And number two, the further they went off from their ancestral diet, eating processed sugar, grains, flours, lots of chronic disease came into effect. He would show all kinds of cavities, palate shrinking. You could just see it. It was a picture book, right? Society's untouched from modern processed food, beautiful smiles, beautiful skulls, awesome teeth. And then as they went down the line and they went further away, more processed food, you could see with the pictures the mouth going sideways with that.
Yep, I love that book. Everybody should read it, especially if
Yeah.
you're in the nutrition
Nutrition and
world.
physical degeneration.
Yeah, get a copy of it. Look at the photos. Okay, we should probably get back to some of the notes you've got here. Why don't we talk about these drugs? Because there's a lot of people on these pharmaceuticals that are negatively impacting their body's production of melatonin and/or they're disrupting their circadian rhythm. So why don't we dive in? Because beta
Oh,
blockers
yeah.
blew my freaking mind because so many
Yep.
people are on beta blockers for blood pressure.
I just want to hit one more kind of mechanism here. So when we have this quinolinic acid, right, that's going to be derived. So you get tryptophan coming in. So you're eating your protein. You're making all your brain chemicals from protein. So we need good digestion, good enzymes, good acid. Our gut microbiome plays a very important role because that's going to increase, like Evan said, the cytokines, that indolamine 2,3 dioxygenase. And also, when we have lots of quinolinic acid, it's a neurotoxin. And so what it does is it stimulates the NMDA receptor site. That's the N-methyl D-aspartate receptor site, leading to neuronal damage. All right. And this is what we see. This excitotoxic activity is very common in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And so elevated quinolinic acid can further exacerbate that neuroinflammation. And melatonin plays a very powerful role because one, that comes from our protein, tryptophan, which goes to 5-HTP, which goes to serotonin, melatonin. That plays a very important antioxidant role dealing with the oxidative stress induced by the quinolinic acid and the neurotoxicity. And it kind of modulates the receptor site and dampens the inflammation caused by that quinolinic acid.
Yeah, and remember, this all can happen by gut dysbiosis. If you have
Bingo.
bacterial issues, parasites, they're labeling them as pathogens. These
Mhm.
pathogens disrupt this proper tryptophan to serotonin to melatonin pathway. Instead, it's going tryptophan to quinolinic acid. And we've seen this on paper. We've done thousands of organic acids tests, and we've seen it 100 times looking at elevated quinolinic acid. And we can use specific things to calm that inflammation down and that can be very helpful. But ultimately, we have to fix what's disrupting the gut.
100%, because once we get this inflammation and we have the immune activation. Then we get the leaky gut. And that allows more toxins, more endotoxins, LPS, bacteria to get into the bloodstream. That's going to then cross our blood brain barrier, our BBB, which is essentially our astrocytes. And that's going to activate more microglial cells. And then the more inflammation in the brain that we get, the more we're going to see the increase in beta amyloid or tau plaques in the brain that were associated with these Alzheimer's dementia like pathophysiologies.
Yeah, pull this up. It's a little bit grainy. It's not the highest definition photo, but it's what they had in this study here. You just mentioned leaky blood-brain barrier. That's exactly what they're showing here and how this manifests. Do you see that? This image I've got?
Yeah, let me get this up. Well, let me see here.
And for folks listening to the audio, if you're listening on Dr. J's podcast or my podcast here, just know that these videos are on the Justin Health YouTube because we like to show you some of these studies and some of these graphics. So if
Yep.
you're listening via audio, you want to see what the heck we're showing you, go to the YouTube channel. You'll be able to find this video. But here's what Dr. J just mentioned, leaky blood-brain barrier and how that's creating an issue. And you're going to see here Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and MS. They have very, very similar mechanisms, being leaky gut, leaky blood-brain barrier, pro-inflammatory cytokines like TNF alpha, you have decreased butyrate in the gut, and you have decreased serotonin and melatonin. They're all leading. It's like, what flavor of cognitive dysfunction do you want? Take your pick. MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, they're all occurring in very similar pathways.
100%. So now let's go back to some of the medications, right? Because there are some drugs that can impact some of this. So beta blockers are a big one. Now, beta blockers are essentially, they block the beta receptor site on the heart, which stimulates the heart to contract more. And again, it also can deplete different nutrients. It can actually deplete magnesium as well. Now, magnesium is actually a natural beta blocker, but what does magnesium also do? Ding, ding, ding. It's a natural anti-inflammatory for the brain. You can listen to famous brain surgeon Russell Blaylock. He talked about using magnesium with his patients that were getting craniotomies, and he would see healing and recovery weeks faster than other patients that had craniotomies done similar at that time. And so magnesium, one, is a natural beta blocker. Two, it doesn't have the side effects that beta blockers do, because the beta blockers are going to negatively impact melatonin production. But two, it also is going to lower that quinolinic acid and help with tissue inflammation, because it's that interleukins and the cytokines. That's what's going to rev up, increase those endolamines, get that NMDA receptor site stimulated and cause more of the inflammation in the brain. So beta blockers are a big one.
Yeah, some people are like, beta blocker. What's a beta blocker? That is your blood
Blood
pressure
pressure.
medication. It
Yeah.
could be a heart medication if you've had a stroke or maybe you've had
Mhm.
AFib. You could be on those. So
Pretty common.
metoprolol is going to be pretty common.
Yeah, metoprolol. I mean, you got 3 or 4 kinds of medications for blood pressure. You got your water pills, your diuretics, your hydrochlorothiazide. You got your beta blockers. You got your ACE inhibitors, angiotensin converting enzyme drugs, and you got your ARBs, your angiotensin receptor site blockers. Those are your big 3 or 4 that you're going to see on the BP side. But beta blockers are pretty common. You have tachycardia, palpitations. You have a little bit of an arrhythmia at all. You have hyperthyroid issues, right? You're going to be on beta blockers.
Yeah. How about
Uh,
POTS? You got mold and you have Lyme
yeah,
disease, and then you have POTS
yeah.
like I did.
Adrenal issues. Yeah.
If I would have went the conventional medical route, I would have definitely been on a beta blocker. I had blood pressure swings. I had heart palpitations. I was not feeling good at all. Luckily, I got it under
Yep.
control. Motherwort helped me. It's an
Mhm.
incredible natural
Mhm.
support for the heart. But
Lemon
man,
balm.
I easily, if I would have went conventional cardiology, I would have been on a beta blocker, therefore disrupting my nighttime melatonin production.
100%. Next one, benzodiazepines. I mean, this could be your Klonopin. This could be your Xanax, right? These work on the GABA receptor site of the brain. Highly addictive, highly difficult to get off. A lot of psychiatrists, I think, pull their patients off these medications way too fast. If you come off it, you have to go under the guidance of a prescriber that is going to do it in a very slow, tapered way. But benzos can also decrease acetylcholine production. Acetylcholine is very important for the brain, very important for memory and cognitive function. And of course, it's going to impact melatonin production as well. And melatonin produces serotonin. Serotonin helps with anxiety and mood too. So you can see when you start to deplete the important nutrients that actually could control the symptoms that you probably went on the medications for, because benzos are a lot of times for anxiety and sleep. And if you decrease the nutrients that actually can help with anxiety and sleep, that's why it further exacerbates side effects and long-term dependency.
Yeah, creates the perfect customer. All right, number
It does.
3, antidepressants,
Hmm.
especially the SSRIs. Those are going to
Yep.
affect melatonin synthesis and alter your circadian rhythm, and those are passed out like candy. I mean, You and I see this all day, every day on the intake form. People are doing SSRIs like crazy. I'm sure I could pull up some stats if I want to freak you out, but it's a big number.
Yeah, and this could be Prozac. This could be Zoloft as well. This could be Paxil. Again, this could be Celexa. Again, treating OCD, depression, um, mood issues. Lexapro, Luvox. Right. These are all going to be the big brand name for SSRI. And all how these medications work. You got a presynaptic neuron. You got a postsynaptic neuron. You have the synaptic cleft here. A lot of the neurotransmitters hang out between the pre and the post. They hang out right here, and there's these reuptake ports on the side of the neuron where all the neurotransmitter go back up. And essentially, these drugs prevent the neurotransmitters from being recycled and going back up. The problem is you increase it in the short run, so you get more neurotransmitter. So neurotransmitter helps that action potential go from one nerve to the other, so you get better communication. But in the long run, those neurotransmitters are recycled at a faster rate the more they don't go back home. Right? If they stay out from that neuron, they break down faster. You accumulate it in the short run, but in the long run, you break them down faster, thus creating potentially more dependency, higher doses, stronger medications down the line.
That's scary. Okay, so there's give or take 350-ish million people in the US. According to 2022 census data, is like 330 plus million people. And the CDC is saying here that at least 1 in 10 are taking antidepressants. So you're at what,
Oh,
30,
yeah.
35 million people on these things?
Oh, especially with the kids. And then just, there isn't a lot of great data on brain development while you're on these medications. It's one thing giving it to an adult that has a fully developed brain, right? Females 22, 23, men at 25 to 30, have developed brains. And so there's not a lot of data on giving it to people that grow up with the medication. And so, yeah, it's definitely something you want to avoid being on in the long run. Again, if you need it for something acute, that's fine. But you really want to talk to your provider to try to get on the lowest possible dose responsibly, but get to the root cause, right? Figure out why you have these issues and use the nutrients and the building blocks to get your brain chemistry dialed in.
A little bit of a tangent, but just to share this here, kind of what's happened even just since you and I were in high school and to current
Hmm.
day,
Hmm.
from 1988, 1994, all the way up into '08, just that little period there, the antidepressant use in the US went up 400%. Now, keep in
Yeah.
mind, '08's a long time ago. That's over 15 years ago. So who knows what the number is now? It's probably 1,000% increase in usage.
100%. I mean, you just can't eat all these processed foods, processed grains, processed flours, have more high fructose corn syrup, more gluten, more toxicity, and expect a healthy brain, right?
Yeah.
Your brain's 70% fat and cholesterol. So kids need to be eating healthy fats and healthy cholesterol and healthy protein to start their day. It's that simple. What I see with my kids and their fellow peers, lots of processed grains, lots of inflammatory things, juices, sodas, pops. I mean, eating Gatorade. I mean, it's just pure sugar, right? Unless
That's
you're
yeah.
outside sweating your butt off, right? It's not going to be the best thing for you. And so, in general, you got to start with the building blocks to make the raw material. And if your neurotransmitters are made from protein and you're eating lots of processed grains and flour, you can't have the wrong building blocks creating the right nutrients for your brain. It's
Yeah,
impossible.
yeah, well said. Okay, we got a few more drugs to hit. So stimulant medications like ADHD drugs, that's going to delay sleep onset, disrupt sleep wake
Yeah,
cycle.
it could be your Ritalin, your Adderall, any of the precursor methamphetamine stimulants, all those as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, corticosteroids, that can disrupt the timing of melatonin release. That's
Hmm.
interesting.
Because cortisol goes down during the day, right? So if you're taking prednisone or corticosteroids later in the day, guess what? There's a natural relationship between melatonin going up and cortisol going down. So if you're taking something that could be cortisol based later in the day, you're going to screw up that ratio. Cortisol goes up, melatonin drops and plummets.
Yeah, well said. Antibiotics, some can affect melatonin metabolism. That makes sense
Uh,
because it's affecting your gut bacteria. And where do you make melatonin?
yeah.
400 times more in the gut versus the brain. So there you go.
And that great article that you showed with the despotic bacteria impacting cytokines and interleukins, thus increasing that indolamine, thus causing NMDA receptor site issues. Plus, fluoroquinolones destroy the mitochondria. Lots of studies on that, and they impact ligaments and tendons. Lots of guys have ACL, not ACL, but gastrocnemius. What's the tendon in the back? Achilles tendon. The
Mhm.
gastrocnemius tendon gets blown out with people on a lot of these antibiotics.
Yeah, there's whole websites dedicated to that called Getting Floxed,
Mm-hmm.
FLOXED. There's
Yep.
websites like that where you can read about these Cipro stories.
Oh yeah, really sad. NSAIDs. So again, ibuprofen, great medication to use acutely. I bang my finger on a hammer, right? Nice, but we don't want to be on these medications long term. Significantly impact gut lining, liver health, but also they suppress melatonin levels long term. Fluoroquinolone impacts melatonin long term. Corticosteroids impact the circadian rhythm, thus impacting melatonin as well.
Yeah. So what do we got to do? Well, we got to get your gut tested to figure out, do you have
Mhm.
dysbiosis that's furthering intestinal permeability, leading to inflammatory cytokines, potentially leading to Alzheimer's. We have to get the parasites out if they're there, get the H. pylori under control if it's there, fix the yeast, fix the dysbiosis, Clostridia, Morganella, Klebsiella, whatever's there, we're going to find it. And we're going to use herbs because we know the literature is clear on antibiotics being not a good thing. If you're dying, maybe, but my God, if you have just a chronic issue that can't be resolved, I've rarely seen an antibiotic help people feel better, especially in Lyme. Most people tell me they regret it and it's the worst thing, and it sent them backwards. They had more chronic fatigue, more dysbiotic issues, more yeast overgrowth after taking antibiotics. So, in general, we're going to use herbal antimicrobials. These herbs have so many different alkaloids and terpenes in them. They're very unique. They can help to battle even the most resistant bacteria, such as Clostridia, which the World Health Organization, CDC, they both are at this consensus that we are now in the post antibiotic era. And they're really pushing people hard to develop new, more powerful antibiotics. But we've got herbs sitting right there, and they do a great job.
Correct. And then you can go right in your app too if you have an iPhone. I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but if you go right in your display and brightness settings here, okay, it may come in reversed, but when you go in display and brightness, there'll be a thing that says night shift. Night shift will impact the blue lights. And so as you go into sunset, it'll actually knock the blue light down on the phone. So you go into display and brightness, you go night shift, and I have mine set to sunset to sunrise. So it'll automatically knock the blue light down as the sunset occurs and the sunrise comes up, it'll bring the blue light back. And then also I use some glasses at night that have a blue light filter on it to knock the blue light anyway. So these are good little hacks that you can do to just be on top of it, to make sure your technology, one, you're in control of your technology, you're using it, it's not using you. You can also get some Faraday bags too. Faraday bags are great. So if you want your phone near you, just pop it in a Faraday bag, which blocks all EMF, all radiation from it as well. That's a good option too at night. I have some Faraday bags on my couch that I throw it into if I want to just like totally detach from technology. And yeah, some simple things out of the gate. What else, Evan?
You know what's cool? They're even putting blue light filter technology into cars. So my van, on the display settings, I was poking around in the menu, and on the display, you can add a blue light filter to all the screens, your speedometer and your main screen with your radio information and your maps. And so I just cranked it up and just leave it there. I like that nice warm amber screen. So this is even coming into vehicles now, which is cool, especially for people that are night driving. I guess you don't want to necessarily have a ton of melatonin and fall asleep on the wheel,
Yeah.
but I think it's cool to have. I think it's
Yeah.
it's a great feature.
And I'll take my brightness too. I'll just take my brightness and bring it down to like 20%. And just that alone will knock down any of the excess blue light there too. So simple little strategies. Also, get your gut looked at. I mean, easy thing out of the gate. A lot of these things are protein getting into the bloodstream, and you need hydrochloric acid, you need enzymes. So if you don't have good digestion, that's going to be a problem. If we had dysbiotic bacteria there, that's going to be a problem. So we start with the hierarchy. Put the good foods, put the organic grass-fed meat, the chicken, the fish, the really good proteins in. Chew it up. Make sure you can break it down with enzymes, acids, biosupport, and then we can always go deeper with testing. Do we have mycotoxins? Do we have deficiencies? Because maybe with this problem has been going on for 10 years, it may not be a simple thing as just eat protein again, just take some HCl, because there could be some chronic deficits that need to be supported specifically, and there could be some impediments with microbes impacting digestion. So we may have to go a little deeper. If this is a short issue, you can start with simple diet and lifestyle. If it's deeper, then you want to dive in with a good functional medicine person so we can get a little bit more specific and granular.
Yeah, well said. If you need help, consults are available worldwide. You could reach Dr. J, that's Dr. Justin Marchegiani, at justinhealth, justinhealth.com. Me, I'm Evan Brand at evanbrand.com. You can reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you. We have distributors all around the world, so Australia, UK, doesn't matter where you are, we can help you. We'll help authorize these labs, get them to you as fast as we can. We'll look at everything. We'll make a protocol to help you get better and fix these issues, because if you don't have your health, you have no wealth. I think health is wealth. I mean, I look at people now, we study people for a living. So when I see people out in society, you'll see a guy who's clearly taking care of himself. He's 80 years old at the gym, and cognitively he sounds great, he looks great, his speech is great. And then you'll see other guys that are falling apart. So this idea that aging has to be this miserable process where you end up with a neurodegenerative disease, I don't want to believe that's true. I think we can try to mitigate a lot of this with these strategies we're talking about here.
Yeah, and really, it takes no more effort to get what you want than what it does to get what you don't want. Meaning, if you are having bad habits in your life and you are not liking the results of those bad habits, it's a habit that's getting you that bad result. Well, you can create a good habit that gets you that good result. Like in my book, I talk about the Kaizen principle, which is very simple. If you start a habit, you get the dopamine hit of doing the habit. You start reaping the results. You're feeling better because of this simple habit. And that gives you the dopamine and the focus to take on another habit. So like my simple analogy was, hey, your health is really poor. Let's just focus on drinking clean water this week. Like it's just clean water. That's it. All you're doing is clean water. And then now let's make your diet just organic instead of same food, but just organic. Just no pesticides now. And then now let's try to walk 8,000 steps this week. And so you're just taking little simple habits, not that difficult. You're layering them there one at a time, letting the dopamine hit drive the next habit and the next habit, and next habit. And then in 6 months, your diet is totally changed. Your lifestyle is totally changed because you just simply stacked one on top of the other.
Yep. Yep. I love it.
But if you're like me or you, we'll just we'll just reinvent the wheel all at once, right? So it just depends. There's different places that you guys can come in. But evanbrand.com for Evan, drjustinhealth.com for myself. Put your comments down below. Want to know what you guys think. Want to know what topics you'd like us to go over in the future. Evan, anything else, man?
Oh, I think we're doing good. Just take care of yourself and make sure you go to bed at a reasonable time, especially if you have young children. Don't let them be on the screen 8, 9, 10 p.m. Get them to bed. Come on. Like live like the Amish. They go to bed when the sun goes down. They're pretty smart. They're smart. They have a lot of good things going for them lifestyle wise. You don't see hardly any of the same level of disease in that population that we see in the people doing the screens. So they're onto something.
Yeah, 100%. Don't let your technology drive you. You drive it. Simple habits. Start one
Yep.
today. Awesome,
Yep.
Evan.